Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to Golden Spike Tactical. Just here with my sidekick on the range today. We're going to do a little Mosin Nagant shooting. Hey, where are you going?
Hey guys, thanks once again for tuning in to the Golden Spike Tactical channel to watch part 2 of the Mosin Nagant. This is a 1933 Tula Arsenal one, and one thing you want to look for when you're picking up a Mosin Nagant is to make sure that all the serial numbers match up. So there's a serial number stamped on the side of the bolt, there's a serial number stamped on the side of the receiver. You want to make sure those match up. If they match up, that's a good sign that you've got a good Mosin Nagant. You want to have a look down the sights. Some of the Mosins, especially the 40s models, the sights are canted to the side. The other thing you want to look for is, if you're going to pick out a Mosin, is make sure that the bore is in good condition. You usually do that just by taking the bolt out, throwing a pen light down one end of the bore and looking down the other. If the riflings look to be in pretty good shape, you got yourself a fine Mosin. Now, in the last video I kind of alluded a little bit as to my opinions, my feelings of the Mosin. I'm not going to come out and do a full review on the rifle. I'm just going to give you my first impressions. And I think one of the biggest problems is people will buy a Mosin with the impression that they're going to build a solid precision rifle. I disagree. While I think it's possible to hit steel at 500 yards, maybe even a little further with a Mosin Nagant with some skill, it is not going to shoot sub-MOA patterns, especially with steel surplus ammunition, that a modern rifle can. Now, I don't think the Mosin Nagant is capable of shooting sub-MOA at longer distances. One thing that I think the Russians did right about the 54R is they made most of their projectiles boat tail. So, and if you don't know the meaning boat tail, it means the rear of the bullet that's seated inside of the brass kind of tapers off to a smaller point. Tapers off to a smaller point and flattens out in the back. And boat tail bullets are actually great for traveling long distances accurately, and I think the Russians got that right, which is why their surplus ammunition is actually pretty decent. But as far as the Mosin Nagant shooting sub-MOA patterns at long distances, I don't think it's going to hold up, and there's a couple of reasons why. I have a modern specimen of a precision rifle here. This is my Savage Model 10 FCP, and I just want to point out some features that are necessary for that sub-MOA precision. And the first one is the bull barrel, which the Mosin does not have. This bull barrel is thick and it's heavy. It's really a pain to lug around, but the reason we have the fluted bull barrel is because when the barrel heats up, it loses its rigidity. And when it loses its rigidity, it vibrates more when you fire the gun, and thus throwing the shot off at long distances a little bit. With a bull barrel, that rigidity still remains when the barrel is hot. The fluting also helps it to disperse and lose heat, cool off faster, because your shots will get less accurate. This rifle barrel will get hot after about 10 shots. The Mosin barrel will get hot at about, I don't know, I'd say 4 or 5 shots, because it's a very thin barrel. The second feature I'd like to point out about precision rifles is it's got a floated barrel. The barrel does not touch the end of the stock, and the reason that's important is when the stock gets hot, it swells. Even synthetic stocks can swell when they get hot. And when they swell, it pushes on the barrel, decreasing the accuracy or changing the zero of the rifle. Mosins can be guilty of this just as well, especially wood stocks. Wood stocks in humid climates are more susceptible to swelling and thus changing the zero of the rifle, pushing that barrel out of the way. The other thing I want to point out in a precision gun is you've got to have your scope mounts straight. You got to have them almost perfect. And these days, with modern precision rifles, we have software technology, laser technology to ensure that scope mounts are put on straight. And aside from that, you also need a good pair of rings that will hold that scope straight onto the rifle, ensuring that it holds its zero. And another key to long-range shooting, and a lot of people take this for granted, is the optic. I've got a 4-16, a Vortex 4-16 scope on this rifle.
I thought you were spotting me, girl.
So if you want to shoot sub-MOA at long distances, you need that good scope, you need a good way to mount it,
To the right.
you need a good barrel, and you need a good
Mia,
stock.
come.
There's a lot that go into it.
Down.
Aside from that,
Down.
your technique will win the
Down.
day for precision shooting. Now, the Mosin Nagant itself does
All
not
right.
have these
Here goes
features,
nothing.
unfortunately. It's got a very thin barrel. Like I said, it'll heat up after 4 to 5 shots. And the quality control wasn't as good. They didn't have software technology like they did a long time ago. The stock isn't ergonomic. Now, I have toyed a little bit with, I've got some scope mount kits for the Mosin Nagant. And I've tried
Last one,
2 different scope mounting kits
You get it?
on 3 different Mosin
Oh,
Nagants.
still there?
I wish I did a video on it, but I didn't have access to a good video camera at the time. This was in my younger years. All I can say about the scope mounting kits is be careful. I think some of them run too high of a price. They're not going to produce the results that you want. And most of these scope mounting kits involve the removal of the the rear sight. And this can be a pain.
Oh, thanks. I love
It'll
you
require
too.
some
Thanks.
tools. The way I did it is I just got a C-clamp, compressed the spring holding this in, punched out the pin on the rear sight, and pulled the rear sight off. The problem is with these tools is they are not designed to compensate for a rear sight that is off or improperly mounted. So if you have a Mosin with a crooked rear sight, it's not going to work too well. I wouldn't suggest going that route, and if at all possible, if you do have a Mosin, I would keep it as stock as possible, to be honest with you. There are other cool kits for the Mosin, like stock kits. This is an M44 Mosin Nagant, and I actually threw this Monte Carlo stock on here because I was shooting this rifle up in the mountains, and I pulled the trigger on one shot and the rear, the butt, just split open. I remember losing the butt plate of the rifle, and the wood of the butt had just split open after shooting it. It's a powerful rifle. This M44 model actually kicks a lot more. This was a 1944 model, so it's a little bit newer. But I think I've shot this one more than the M9130 that I have. But because that stock split, I looked for a replacement stock, and replacement stocks are super expensive to come across. So I actually came across an old M44 stock from a buddy of mine. I haven't put it back together yet because it needs refinishing, but this Monte Carlo stock did a great job for the time being. The only trouble is all Mosins are kind of manufactured different, and the only problem is I had to take a grinder and grind out the side of this stock in order to make room for the interrupter to flex back and forth, because it couldn't load more than one cartridge. So I ground out a huge section of the stock right here to make sure that interrupter would operate properly, and now it's operating properly. So all I'm saying is if you get Mosin accessories, don't be too surprised if they don't fit too well. I also tried a scope mounting kit for this one, and the results weren't very great for the scope mounting kits. The scope mounting kit I got came with both the M44 mounting hardware and the M9130 mounting hardware, because the pop-up sights on the M44 model are a little bit different than each other. This one's shorter. This one's only rated to about 1,000 yards, where the Mosin is rated to, gosh, I haven't looked at the sight on that one. But anyway, I did everything I could to make sure that this scope mounting kit would stay on straight, and nothing could do the job. I put Loctite on the thing. I put, multiple times, I tried resetting and leveling the scope, and it just wouldn't go. Even the M9130 had problems with the scope mounting kit. And the the trouble with that was the sight must have been a little bit off on the rear because I could not get the scope to level on it. The other trouble is you need to find a long eye relief scope for best results. Otherwise, when you zoom way in on that target, you're gonna have a hard time finding it with that dark ring there. So that's the only trouble with the Mosin Nagant mounting kits. Your other option, of course, is to tap and drill the receiver, which I wouldn't do. I wouldn't trust to myself. I'd have a gunsmith do it. But that and all said, I would rather have more nickels and dimes saved towards a precision rifle if I want to shoot sub-MOA groups. And I'm a hands-on history kind of guy. I enjoy black powder. I enjoy any type of firearm that has some historical value to it, and the Mosin Nagant definitely has that. Before the days of the AK, this was a very proliferated rifle. It found its way into the hands of the Viet Cong. It found its way into the hands of Eastern Europeans. And some even say it's been used as late as the Kosovo conflict in the mid-90s. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. Now, what do I like about the Mosin Nagant? I want to focus on some likes I like about the Mosin Nagant, and that is this cartridge. I love the 54R. It is a cartridge that was ahead of its time. And, you know, the ballistics sometimes eclipse the 308 or the 30-06 or sit somewhere in between. Depends on the size, but most of the cartridges you find for the 54R are boat-tailed cartridges, and I think that's an ingenious design. Long-range shooters still use boat-tailed cartridges because they retain their speed a lot better. There's less drag, there's a better ballistics coefficient, and they're more accurate in long distances, especially to distances of 500 yards and more. So as far as the ballistics go, the 54R is great, and I've done some ballistics testing on it. I'd rather cover the ballistics specifics in a later video where I talk about the 54R alone. But the downside of the 54R is it's a rimmed cartridge. To its credit, it's the longest serving military cartridge to date for smokeless powder. It's still there, and it's been around since 1891, so that's saying a lot. You can actually buy these stripper clips for the Mosin Nagant. I've just got dummy rounds on it right now. But the downside of the cartridge is it is rimmed, and there's a reason First World militaries have dropped the rimmed cartridge. It just is not as reliable. And some people will argue that it's more reliable from an extraction point of view. I think for belted guns, the rimmed cartridge is great because it can extract it easier with that rimmed cartridge. Unfortunately, I think for precision rifles, I think there's a better way to go, and the Russians still use the 54R in their Dragunov sniper rifles, and so do some other countries. Now, you've seen me in the video operate the stripper clip, but when you load these stripper clips, you've got to stagger the rims on top of each other, or you're going to get rim lock. And oftentimes, in a Mosin like this, where the magazine spring is really weak, it's an older magazine spring, you'll stagger the cartridges in the stripper clip, but the bottom two cartridges will bounce under one another because your spring is too weak, and then the cartridges will lock up. You'll get rim lock. That actually happens a couple of times in the video. You may see there, but oh, it went smoothly that time. But that's how you load it with the stripper clip. Stripper clips are actually fun to use. They're a little dated. People don't use them anymore. And now there's a lot of different gear your Mosin comes with. I'd rather do that in a different video talking specifically about the uses for those tools. You'll have a little tool kit. I'll do a video on that sometime down the road. But you can also buy some aftermarket things like the stripper clips. And these are pretty cheap. The problem with them is if you get carried away loading with stripper clips, the way I load them, if I want to load them quick, is I throw the ammo down there and I just flick it out with my thumb to ensure that I can get the receiver free to fire the rifle. And the problem with that is these things are so easy to lose. And fortunately they're cheap. You can buy a bulk package of them for a reasonable price. I'm not sure how much they are anymore. I'd have to check online. But anyway, That's just one downside of the Mosin, is the rim lock issue. I think the other downside is it's harder to find now the quality Mosins that you want. Some of the stocks aren't super great. I've already broken one stock shooting. But in the end, if you want a precision shooting gun, I would save your nickels and dimes and buy a lower end Savage for $400. I would save your nickels and dimes and maybe buy an entry-level rifle and learn how to shoot long range really well with that rifle with a decent scope on it, and then get into long range shooting. I don't think the Mosin is equipped. It's possible to hit a gong at 500 or 600 yards with the Mosin Nagant. It's definitely possible. But all I'm going to say is you're not going to have the shot consistency of a modern rifle, because they didn't have laser technology back then. They didn't have software engineering to help precision machine these guns. And in fact, a lot of these were built by workers who were little more than slaves in the Soviet Republic. So I wouldn't put a lot of stock in it being a precision gun. What's the Mosin to me? The Mosin to me, it's just a recreational piece, and as I've said earlier, it's kind of just a nostalgic gun for me. It's a gun that I want to go to and shoot, but there's something gratifying about it because you can shoot a full-size rifle cartridge for super cheap, and that's hard. Last gun show I went to, I bought 800 rounds of Mosin ammunition for a great price, and I'm still going through that ammo like crazy. I'll also post a link on this video description to help you identify what kind of surplus ammo you're shooting. A lot of them will have markings on the head stamp, and you'll just be at a loss as to what it says. But that's where I sit. I don't think the Mosin is garbage. I think it's a decent surplus rifle, but at the same time, I'm not gonna grab my Mosin if the world is ending and head to the woods. I'd much rather do that with an AR or a AK platform. That being said, I'm not trying to ruffle anybody's feathers. I just view the Mosin Nagant as a less useful tool than a modern carbine. First of all, because the ammunition will be easier to find in an end-of-world scenario than the Mosin Nagant ammunition, and second of all, because it's not a modern rifle. It's going to have some problems. And in fact, if you don't take care of your Mosin, if you're not extra particular about your Mosin's well-being, it can rust. It can have some corrosion. And especially if you're shooting the corrosive ammo, if you don't clean that gun religiously after shooting the corrosive ammo, you're gonna have a Mosin that's looking pretty sad eventually. Well, thanks for tuning in, watching this video. Thanks to all our subscribers who support this channel. I know I haven't put out a lot of video content lately, but being a single dad, it's really hard. It's hard to find time to do these videos. We've only started to begin ramping up our channel. It's still very young. But if you like what you see, give us a like, hit the subscribe button, and we'll keep filling our channel up with great content. Thanks to you for supporting Gold Spike Tactical. Keep your powder dry, folks.